Catherine. Roscoe. I sat at her desk for weeks and I can't remember her name. Clearly, it's the end of a long day. I was just teaching simplex method all for 2 lessons now. That's my excuse. So let's see if I get all these names right. We have Renz, Martin, Walter, Eva, Steen.
Very good. Stein.
Stein. Okay. And they're going to tell us about their escapade in California's Delta and risk analysis. So, there you go.
Thank you, Jay, for this warm welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the seminar as we Dutch talk to you to this presentation entitled Dutch Levy Risk Analysis and Public Participation in California's Delta. So, let me begin with a blank sheet saying, what if? This levy is protecting that island, which is a home for 2,500 people, mainly elderly people, often living in mobile homes and below flood level, with a total land value of approximately $400 million US. So, as explained that, it's a question, we'll come back to you that later. So I will start my presentation. What am I going to tell you? First, an introduction about who we are and what are we going to do during this presentation. And then we will explain what our project is, what is SimBethel, and what could be the use of SimBethel for Bethel Island. And then we will explain the building process of the game, and we conclude with what we have learned and some recommendations. So Jay introduced us. So I'm Rens, this is Walter, Martin, Yves, and Stein, and we are from the Technical University of Delft, and we are from hydraulic engineering, flood risk, hydraulic structures, urbanism, and computer science. So that's a multidisciplinary project team which focuses on flood risk management project. So why Dutch? So last seminar we were in this room as well, and there was also a Dutch person talking about what is the Netherlands. So a short repetition of that. 2/3 of the Netherlands is below sea level, and in the severe flood in 1953 was there was a reason to reconsider our levy system and build some more levees or barriers to protect us against flood from the sea and flood from the rivers. So this is currently flood protection levels what we have in Holland. When you see it here, this is the urbanized area in red that has a flood probability of 1 in 10,000 years. So I talked about our game is a serious game, but most of you have never heard about the term serious game. So I will read out loud what is a serious game. A serious game allows learners to experience situations that are impossible to the real world for reasons of safety, cost, time, or their rare occurrence. So for example, a flight simulation. It is costly and dangerous to let pilots practice in real life with planes. So that's why they built a serious game, to let pilots practice in a simulation where they are able to crash planes. Another example is from a company who's supporting us, Deltares. They made a levy controller where people can learn how to patrol levees and make reports when they see some irregularities. So now I come to serious gaming in flood risk management. Most people in the floodplain never experience flood because it's quite a rare occurrence, and that causes a lack of knowledge in that field and sense of urgency. Like I said, in Holland in 1953 we had a severe flood, and that resulted in the Dutch Delta works. And the last time the guy from Holland talks about Room for the River. That's another project after an almost a near flood. In 1993 and 1995, we had a close call and a wake-up call, so to speak. So that was the start for the project Room for the River. And an American example is New Orleans. Making a realistic game can trigger people to act before something terrible happens. It uses as a virtual disaster as a trigger instead of happening first the disaster and then acting. So first, Ties is the initiator of our project. He was on this flood risk management game for in the Netherlands, like shown here. Here you can play with the levee heights, barriers to discharge water in different channels, different rivers, to get rid of the water towards the sea. So SimBethel, serious game simulating decisions on flood risk management and spatial planning in an island in the California Delta. So now I'll explain where is Bethel Island located. Here you can see that is the Californian Delta. On the right here, that is Bethel Island. It's a peaceful island surrounded by agricultural islands. Bethel Island is a more urbanized island compared to the others. Why did we choose Bethel Island instead of somewhere else in the world? Now, the reason is that for a serious game, it is easy to pick a small area. So Bethel Island is relatively small, 2,500 inhabitants, not many infrastructure, and it is relatively urbanized compared to the other islands, which are mostly agricultural areas. But that is another thing that's actually a problem, because an urbanized area is more difficult to model than just an agricultural area. And like I said, there are no important infrastructure, mainly, so that results in mainly a local problem. The state is not very interested in the Bethel Island because it has no highway, it has no windmills, etc. And people who are living there are just elderly people enjoying the day, the weekends and holidays, and have a lack of knowledge about the levees and the flood protections. And the organization who is responsible for patrolling and maintaining levees have a limited resources like money or equipment. So I will show you some pictures. We went on a levee patrol a few weeks ago, and there we shot some pictures about the current situation right there, and we give our Dutch view on these pictures. So here you see on the right side the levee, and on the left side the levee you see a normal water condition. So that's, if you can see it clearly, the water level is almost equally to the crest height. So when a high water strikes it is equally to the crest height. And when you have a storm, it probably will overtop. Plus, the riprap on the outside of the levee, it's just, we think, a bit of a mess. And around the island, there are many houses located in or on the levee, and that results in uncertainty. When you are going to investigate what the failure probabilities of your whole levee system, you've got some irregularities and uncertainties because you don't know what is underneath or behind that structure. And we saw also some sprinklers watering the levee for, let's say, days. So the whole levee was soaked. So when we drove on that part, we just sank a little bit into the levee, so that's not good for the condition of the levee. Another thing, at the end of our trip, we passed by a ramp to get to the marinas. So this guy built actually a ramp in the levee. I don't know if I have to explain why it's better to build in the levee, but we Dutch people think building something in the levee without asking permission is not really. And another picture shows that you have different types of ground cover. Here you see grass, and here you see just sand, which can easily erode away. Another thing is you see all different houses on the land side of the levee, and it shows that every piece of the levee is private property. So if you want to do maintenance on it, you have to ask permission to that property owner if you're allowed to maintain the levee. And this is, in our opinion, one of the weakest points in the levee. You will see a very small crest width, let's say less than 12 feet, with the minimum has to be 15 feet. Plus there are many trees on the levee, which is not that good for the stability of the levee. Plus the inner slope is too steep to make it a solid levee like we know in Holland. And the weirdest thing we saw is a tombstone in the levee. A guy lived there and died in 2000, and he thought, yeah, well, I want to be buried in the levee. Okay, next. This is a new project they finished in 2008. That's called Deltares, and that's a project where new houses were built on elevated levees. These levees meet the standards of the FEMA with the occurrence of a 100-year flood. So you can call this a safe area. But in 2008, the project developer went bankrupt, and this project area is just laying like it is shown on the picture. And the people who are in control of maintaining the levee are not allowed to control these levees, so they are not sure about the current condition of this levee. But as we drove on the levee, we could imagine that people would like to live there because it's beautiful, like this picture shows. You see marinas, trees, and it's very quiet over there. So what could be the use for Bethel Island? So these are two main goals we defined during our project. Provide insight to support decisions for more difficult cases than most of the Delta Islands. And when we spoke to the organization who responsible for the levees, they said we have also a lack of money. So how could you develop an island with limited resources in a difficult political system? Plus, when we were there, we were struck that people were not educated about the levees, that just people thought it was their backyard. So we defined the next goal, and that is educate people to make sure that people understand what a levee is. So now Walter is going to tell you about the building process.
Thank you, Rens. All right, so we started with this project in the Netherlands, and we tried to define what aspects we would like to have in our game and what aspects we would leave out. But when you just sum up all the parts you could take in, you get a long list of economy, levee safety. Well, you can read them all for yourself. It's really a swamp of information and of different factors that play a role in California levees, flood risk management, actually. So we narrowed it a bit down, and we also had a great example in SimCity, which is actually, it's kind of a comparable situation. You develop an area, you can have a disaster, little different disaster, but still a disaster, and then you have to build up again. So the principle is the same. So, first of all, how to get a working serious game? How did we do that? Well, as I mentioned, we started gathering a lot of knowledge about California, about the island itself. And then we tried to simplify the information by just singling out the most important parts for our game and for making it a realistic game. Because the point of a serious game is also trying to stay as close to reality as possible. Well, so we built some background models to simulate the economy, to simulate the flood safety on the island. And what's also very important when you are making a game is that you speak with the people that are your target group for the game. Because we worked in the Netherlands for 4 weeks, and then we went here, and I think our third day we went to Bethel Island, and after that our whole vision of the game was shuffled around and changed. So yeah, we had to change some stuff then. And well, also what we did after that, which was also very useful, is testing the game, because then you really find out what the problems are. And so, well, and then you get a cycle in which you can go on with forever, just adapting it and testing it again. So how did we set it up? Oh, I will tell what's in there. First of all, there's the game, which is in the center. And in the game, actually in the circle with game, you try to connect the models and the rules that are behind it. So, for instance, you have the flat risk model, which is here, the economic model, some things about spatial planning, the residents, what do they think, what do they want, and politics, the rules, the relations between different organizations which are, which have a role in the levies, the safety. So, the game board. This is the game board of our game. We rasterized the island to tiles of 500 by 500 feet and gave them a function. And actually, well, that's actually the first thing where you leave reality a bit, because this tile, for instance, says it's levee houses, which are elevated houses, and there might be like 10 elevated houses and 2 non-elevated houses in there, but for the total, that's not really a big issue. So, well, then what happens in the game? So, you try to organize the models and try to make it a simple but interactive game. So we have 3 different players, which I will come to in the next sheet. And you play the game in rounds. So every round you decide whether you want to raise a levy, you want to develop some houses, or do nothing, which is also a good possibility maybe. And each round it takes 5 years. We have 10 rounds, so the goal is survive these 50 years and get on with the game without getting bankrupt. Which is, I think it's quite a challenge. Well, the 3 players. First of all, there's BIMIT, the Bethel Island Municipal Improvement District. Their goal is to make the island safer. BIMIT is the organization that's responsible for the levees, for the maintenance, for improving the levees. But they've got one big problem, and that's that they have no money. There has been some research on raising the levy to, I think, the project levy standard, and that would cost 110 million, and the yearly budget is about 500,000. That's a bit of a difficulty for them. The second one is the Bethelers. Their goal is just to have an amazing life and be a resident. When someone wants to build something in your backyard, you should take action against it, because it's your backyard, and that's their role in the game. And the third one is the project developer. His goal is to make profit, and he can do that by building houses or executing projects on Bethel Island. So what happens in a round? The game is largely organized around chance cards, because there are a lot of different aspects you can put in the game or simulate, but by using chance cards you can just put out a chance card, and then the chance card facilitates the discussion about the issue that is addressed on the card. So for instance, this one is about Boris the Beaver, and in this case, I don't know if the people in the back will read it, but the clue of this card is that BIMIT can choose whether they want to do something about beavers in their levees or not, or they want to exterminate the beavers. That's also a possibility. And by doing that, they need to say during the game, okay, we do this because of this, and that makes them think about certain issues. There's also, for instance, a card about a sand beach. On Bethel Island, there's someone who remodeled the outer slope, let's put it like that, and he dug it away and built his own sand beach with a retaining wall. So people don't have a clue that's bad for the levee or something, but by playing this game and pulling out that card, they see, oh yeah, that's my backyard. That's not good. So, and after that, players can also negotiate with each other about other measures. So David can raise a levy, or the project developer can execute the project, that sort of thing. And after that, all the decisions will have an influence, and the input is put the data is put into the computer, and then the values for the next round are calculated. And there's also the possibility that there is a flood in the next round, and then if there's a flood, people have to recover from that flood, and yeah, it's doubtful whether that will be possible. But so first of all, let's go to the elements. There's the economic model. Yeah, the beamer is a bit. Yeah, there should be some arrows there. Maybe you can see it, but there are about 15 arrows in the picture, and yeah, it models the money or schematizes the money flow between the different players and outside sources like a bank or the government. And this is actually it's not that difficult. It looks pretty simple, but the problem is that there are still too many variables. At a certain moment, we had about 250 variables only in this model. So, at our first gaming session, Nate mentioned you need an accountant to play this game, and that was absolutely true because there were a lot of numbers and you had to calculate things yourself. And when you have that in a game, you don't achieve your goal because people are too busy calculating things and they're not busy thinking about what happens. So, a possible solution is to reduce the amount of variables, but we didn't want to do that because the model would not be realistic anymore, because this is, yeah, actually I think it's pretty much the minimum what you can do with the money flow around the island. So our solution was to predefine the player's choices. At first, the developer could just say, okay, I want to develop that tile or that tile, and you could just randomly pick them. But we, in the next version, that will be predefined into certain projects he can choose. And we also made a fill-in sheet, in which this is the fill-in sheet for BIMIT. They can just say, okay, I want to do that upgrade, I don't get subsidy, they fill it in and they see what their balance will be next round. So it's much more, it's less complicated to see what happens. You can just play around with it and say, okay, that's the best solution. So, the second one is the flood risk model. Well, we did that in, kind of a Dutch way maybe. I don't know if they do it in California. First of all, there's the land use, as you've seen before. This is also put in a model, and each different type of square has its own value. And that value, combined with elevation data and thus the inundation depth of the island, gets you this. This is from the Dutch TNK2 map, and it combines models about the flood, the evacuation, the land use, damage functions into damage and fatalities. This is just a schematization. Unfortunately, we were not able to include the evacuation because it's quite complicated since everybody has a boat, and yeah, so we have no idea where to start. But the 5 over there, they're included in this game, and well, that's the way we calculate our damage in case of a flood. So the two other game elements, the spatial planning, it can be the case that if you develop nature in a certain area, then the value of all the houses goes up. But that's also not included in the game because we decided that it was not important for achieving the goal of the game. That's also, I think, a bit of the message of this presentation when you're building a thing like that, like this. Always, when you try to put something in the game, think about, does it help me achieving my goal, my final goal? And then there's politics. Well, there's a lot of regulations and relations between the state, the Army Corps, the Department of Water Resources, BIMIT. And it's really difficult to model that because it's, yeah, political decisions which are not really logical all the time. And so we had, as a solution, we came up with discussing those problems in chance cards, like your subsidy goes down because of this, and then people can discuss, okay, why does that happen? And so that's also a way of simplifying things, but still, yeah, having them in the game. So we had a test session. This was with the first version of our game. and as I said, you almost needed an accountant to play this game. So the game I've shown is mainly for experts and decision makers. And our first goal was to educate people and help decision makers making decisions. So, but our goal of awareness raising was not really met with this game. So we came up with the SimBethel educational version. We split the game into 2 separate games, and the educational version is a really simple game in which still all the problems are addressed which have a role on Bethel Island, like beaver, for instance. So we had some test sessions with that, and we also, yesterday we played the game with the Bethelers at the safety fair on Bethel Island, a yearly event where they get educated about safety. Well, the fire department was there, and we were also there. And well, this is what it looks like. Maybe it looks a bit familiar, but it's more or less Monopoly, but in a different way, and it's much more exciting than Monopoly. Every player has its own levy reach, and well, he starts here. You're a levy patroller, and you walk around the board. And when you're on your way, you can land on maintenance, and you have to pay something. You can land on chance. And the chance cards address certain issues. So there's a beaver in your left, you skip one turn to exterminate him and pay $100, something like that. And you can also, the players have 2 possibilities, raising their levy and building houses. When they build a house, they get extra tax income when they pass over there, below and here. So they can make more money. But the consequence is that if they have a low levy, they will also have more damage when there's a flood. Because these are unfortunately not here, but here is written high water. And when you land there, you pick a high water card, and it might be that there's a flood, and then you have damage and you have to pay. So players have to find a balance between raising their levy and getting income from houses. And well, it was it's a really fun game, I have to say. There's another thing. Monopoly has the goal of winning by yourself, which is also in this game. The goal is to raise your levy to the highest level as the first one. And there's a common goal because there's commercial growth. When you hit commercial growth, there's $50 from the bank going into the middle. And when you pass start, you get money from that. So if there's $100, you get $50 extra subsidy because the value of the island is higher. And when there's a flood, all the money disappears. So the people can make more money by raising their levies and keeping that money piling up in the middle, which makes it easier. So you can also show that it's an extra goal that to show people that raising one levy is not enough. You have to raise more. So that's this. So in practice, does it work? Well, we were at the safety fair and we had an inquiry, and we didn't want this not to be in a presentation. So, what does living in a flood-prone area mean to you? You better know how to swim. I think that's a bit passive to just know how to swim. But the general reaction about the game was that it's an educational game and it's also fun to play. So, here's a picture of people playing the game. And this was our first game. So this also shows that the game is fairly easy, and he managed to find the right balance between raising his levies and building houses. So what if this levy is protecting that island? Well, it's a difficult case because there are a lot of people on the levies, and they do not know about where they're living, or what the consequence of digging into a levee is, or at least they act as if they don't know. And by making a serious game for these people, you can show them, okay, well, you can do that, but you're in danger, which will cost you money maybe when there's a flood. You also endanger other people. If you can bring that message to the people, it might be easier to protect the island. Because, for instance, a couple of years ago, there was a vote on Bethel Island for the partial tax, which meant that all the landowners on Bethel Island had to pay a certain amount of money for their parcel, which went directly to BIMIT to raise the levies. But it was voted down. The first reason is because there was a financial crisis at that moment. But I think it's also because people do not know and they think, okay, I have to pay money, where does it go? It goes somewhere to a government which does nothing. But by showing that it's important to have decent levies around your house, they might vote different the next time. So, about the application of serious games in flood risk management. Well, for awareness raising, as we have seen, the Monopoly game, the term serious shouldn't be taken too seriously. Because if you take it too serious, it also gets really complicated. Because that's the consequence of modeling reality. So you're trying to find a balance between that, and still, for educational purposes, I think it's enough to just address the issues and tell them about it. And well, whether it's worthwhile to build 10 or 20 houses behind your levee, that's not really an issue for people living in a flood-prone zone. But for the other goal of informing decision makers and helping them make decisions, realism is of more importance, because if it's not realistic, it doesn't make sense and you can base any decision on it. So the main challenge of serious game, especially in the second case, is reducing complex problems to a game without losing touch with reality. Because you can exclude certain factors, but chances are that your game will just drive one way, which is not reality. And we didn't really calibrate our game to another simulation or something, so I think that's also important to do that, so you know you still have the link with real life. So, serious games, California versus the Netherlands. Well, speaking about the two goals we had, the purpose of awareness raising, these games are much more useful in California, because, as I mentioned, the partial tax, the flood risk management is much more organized bottom up. Like, people vote for giving money to the levies. And in the Netherlands, it's more of a government issue. It's organized top down. So you can educate people, which is useful, but it's not really influencing the whole business. For the purpose of design problems and informing decision makers, though, it's relevant for both, because in both countries or states there are a lot of different organizations involved in these kinds of decisions. So giving them a clue of what the other things and the link between them, that can be really useful. And it's also proven to be useful in the Netherlands a couple of times. So we want to thank you for listening to our presentation, and we will also want to thank the people who helped us testing the game, and Jay for the supervision. Are there any more questions?
So I guess my question is, in terms of, for decision making, is the goal, is it almost supposed to be like a fun version of a decision support system, or you actually envision them using this as a tool to maybe look at different alternatives to make a decision?
Well, the first version of our game is mainly, people can look what happens if they take a certain decision, and so it's supportive for to show them what happens if they take a decision. But it's also when it's fun to play, it's just fun to play. So but it's more.
I guess I want to know how important is accuracy, because I have some questions about, but maybe it's not so important. It always depends on your application or what they're going to do with it. But I saw your BMK2 approach, and I wonder, it's quite a complex thing, and I don't I think computing failure probabilities for a levy like that, a levy system like that would be really, really complex.
Yeah, that's also a part where we didn't really get to the reality because it's a really complex levy, and there's also not much information about it. So
That's why I think it's.
yeah, that's true. That's true
And the
because
water system is so.
the people themselves, they have no idea how strong the levy actually is. It's just
So when you do the consequences, I guess you pick one water level. How do you choose which water level to choose?
we analyze the water levels. Yeah, next to the island.
So like an average, you would take an average water level or an
Yeah,
average or
just the inundation depth. Just draw the floodplain over the island.
But there has to be a water level in the water that's loading the levees.
Yeah.
What water level do you choose for that? Do you use?
What do you mean?
So I will transfer, right?
Yeah, you would have like.
No, that's why it's done by
Like you
different.
showed a picture where you showed like it's almost at the top of the levee under normal conditions.
Yeah.
Do you use that water level, or do you use? You said
No,
in a high water it
well-
might be equal, and then flooding it might be even higher.
Yeah, it's we didn't really go into that, but in the big version of the game, the first version, we have some different floods: the 1 in 100 flood, the 1 in 50 flood, the 1 in 200, 1 in 500 flood, and they're just we derived them from the water level data we had, and there's also a possibility that's a separate generator actually. That there's an earthquake, and then it's just the normal water level. So that's separate.
Okay, so you analyze all of those and then you pick one based on a chance card?
No, the flood in the first game is just it's coming out of the computer model. The computer model says there's a flood and it's this big, or there's no flood.
Okay, so it's
That's not in the
randomly
chance
picking which of those 1 in 50, 1 in 200?
Yeah, that's random.
So we don't get to play the game today?
Unfortunately, we gave the Monopoly version away to the people from Bethel Island yesterday. They wanted it so much.
So what are they going to do with it?
Play it at the next BIMIT meeting.
Oh, good.
So, and we also are looking into producing the game at a real game producer. I don't know how you call it.
They
But-
actually, they actually had some contact, so maybe we can. They were trying to make sure they can produce as well.
Oh, great.
So
Also maybe spread it around at schools for kids
Oh, excellent.
starting at a younger age.
Yeah. HKV.
But by playing the game, did you notice that the players came up with some concerted decision for what to do with the island?
You mean the simple version or the?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Well,
way they
actually,
use it.
the huge version was that's called like that. When we played it the first time, it was really complicated, and there were also we found some flaws in the models, so it wasn't really representative for what it should be. But we played the smaller game, the educational version with a family living on Bethel Island, and I don't think they really thought, said that we should build more houses, or we should do this, or we should raise the levies. Although they said that, but I think it's mainly to show people what the importance of a levy is, because when you look at pictures, I don't think they really understand it.
Well, my question was actually with the people that you did play the game with, what were their responses? Did new things come up that they didn't realize, or that, because they also helped give you information, but are there things they saw that were different from what they thought either someone else would do or what could happen?
Well, we didn't play the extended version with the Bethelists themselves. We didn't have the time for that. But speaking about it, there was a guy from a volunteer from BIMIT, and he said, well, to get more statewide interest, just to get more money actually, you could also think about, for instance, developing windmills on the island, because then you have a bigger you're more important to the rest of the world than they are now, because it's actually, the island is one road with a lot of houses on the levee, and that's it. There's nothing else. So I think that most organizations don't really feel the need of investing any money in those levees.
But did the Bethelers see any need of investing any money? Because they are
Yeah, but they don't have money. That's the problem.
And we played the game with people who were interested in levies before they played the game already.
Right.
And so the safety fair, the people who came there were just curious about progress, not about, oh, let's see what a levy is. So that it will be a next step for us just to go by every house and say, okay, do you know what a levy is? Here's our game, please play it.
It's really exciting to see the finished project, especially compared to when first talking with you about it in January. So I think you all have done a fantastic job. I think it's a really great tool for the risk communication piece, which we need out here so badly. One area of caution as you choose to spread this or send it to schools is, you know, you said, I want to teach people about the importance of a levy, but I think we need to also communicate with them the risk about the levy, because what's different about levies and risk in the United States compared to the Netherlands is that in the Netherlands, the safety standard of the levy does not determine whether or not people can live behind it. So as more people are improving the Bethel Island levees, you were saying the value goes up. But once they meet a 100-year standard, then we can start building more houses behind them, and then the consequences are huge. And so I know that it's not just in the Netherlands, it's all over the world where it's levies, 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 but I would encourage that as we're using this to raise awareness, that we think about risk in general and maybe the benefits and costs of what about when we get more people on Bethel Island and the seas continue to rise, are we going to be able to keep up with it, and the land's going to continue to subside, and we're still near an earthquake fault. So all sorts of...
I think that's good suggestion. What we have in the educational version is that after all the levees are built to a certain level, they can build uninsured houses, which are cheaper, but in case of a flood, there's more damage. So it's sort of in there, but not, yeah.
And beside the game, we want to include a manual that which explains what a levy is, so a more detailed description on the levees, what is a riprap, what is a crest height, what is a flood level, etc. So if they want to know what it is, they can read.
So do you have to write this up and turn it into a finished product?
Sorry?
Do you have to write this up and turn it into a finished product for your...
Yeah, we have to do that.
It can be the game manual.
Yeah.
And that would be too simple for us.
All right.
Any other questions from the Americans? I'm glad that I'm happy for your positive responses, and I'm also very positive about the project. I'm glad you learned a lot from it, and comparing two systems is just very interesting. In Holland, there have been nature restoration projects where they calculated that a beaver was worth more than €1 million. So beavers are very popular in Holland and apparently unpopular here in California. And another funny thing is that in Holland, usually when there's more development behind the levees, that means that the levees are stronger. And we were cruising on a boat in Bethel Island and saw the undeveloped island on the one side and Bethel Island on the other side, and you could just clearly see that the levees of the undeveloped island were better than the levees of Bethel Island. So that's again a totally opposite situation. Very interesting to compare. My question, my analysis from the project as a mentor is that so we got the economic and hydraulic modeling on the one hand, and we have the gaming shell, say, over the model on the other hand. And I get the impression that you spent a lot of time exploring what gaming is, and that you learned a lot from that, because it's a new tool in decision support, relatively developing fast because of the new computer possibilities. But I think we're also, everybody's interested in the results from the model. So you did a good job in exploring gaming, and you spent a lot of time on that, and I appreciate it very much. But what are the sort of the gut feeling results from the model that you got? Maybe you spent a little less time on that, but what we all want to know is what Jessica started to discuss. That's a fascinating discussion. Are you going to improve insurance and levy strength to enhance development that on the one hand might increase the risk, but on the other hand could also increase tax revenues for the levies? Or would you choose for not building in floodplains at all? And maybe that would be a better idea, but what do you do when there are already houses in the floodplain? That's a fascinating question that is abundant all around the world. So what is I understand that the uncertainty about levy strength was a big problem in your project. To answer that question, I understand that. I think the other elements, damage, development rates, you can play with them. But what if you would sort of assume a certain levy strength and then diverge from that? What did you do that? And what is the feeling that you get? What would you recommend? And feel free to not recommend. I mean, that's also allowed. If you say, well, we just don't know. But what would you? Could you recommend something? And what would you recommend? Abandon or develop, or something in between?
I think Matt knows most about it.
Well, I developed the economical model, and you can change everything later in the game and see what happens, even including Stein's model about flood risk. And our recommendation would in general be to develop it, because there's still lots of place left, so there's lots of ground left that you can develop, and also make certain attractive things like, well, windmills aren't very attractive, but they would ensure that the island is more important than it used to be before, because there's some now major statewide things going on there. And basically, as long as if you make the island more important, the risk will grow. But it will generate that many more tax income that there's more money to develop the levies. For instance, in the case of a project developer, you could say the project developer, probably also in real life, that you're allowed to develop here, and if you had spent at least like $1 million, for instance, on our levies. And it's all, you can play with all those variables in the game and see what the outcome is. Of course, playing with actual players would make it more accurate, because if you played with a real project developer, he would be able to say that I'm not going to do that. That will give us a more accurate result. But still, my recommendation is to develop it, because that's the way you save people living there.
And you have, and interesting addition to development is that there's also other developments apart from housing that you can do. So that's, I think, a very
commercial revenue as well, creating stores.
And do you have any numbers, like if you twice as many people could result in 4 times as strong levy, which would be a 10 times lower risk, and then the costs and benefits would outweigh each other?
We haven't gone so far yet, but I have built the entire island full of mobile homes, and generate so much income that it's possible to make everything super safe.
Okay. So Jessica, because I get the feeling that you are sort of opposing that strategy. You think it's a bad idea to develop the island, because then the consequences will be bigger, and then we have to offset that by reducing the probabilities, and then you get that spiral of risk and all that.
It seems like the only answer is to do it concurrently. You know, I like what you said. You bait the project developer and say, but you have to fix these levees, and whatever you build has to be protected. But that's like a stipulation like that would be perfect, because then you get the money coming in, you get development of infrastructure, but you also get what you really want, equity of the land.
Exactly, that's true. And it went wrong in the history, because you've seen the picture of Delta coast, which is the completely covered yes, of course will go back now, but it's completely empty still because it went bankrupt. But if they would have invested the money, not in the levees, not in elevating, raising this, because this is all elevated. These things, arms are levees which are at a very high standard. They won't collapse if an earthquake happens. But if you would spend all this money which had to be used to develop this area into the levees, this island would have never been able to flood anymore, so to speak. So that's a lesson for the future, which could be in the game, not be able to do that.
The project developer actually invested $150 million in raising this part of land. If you would have invested that in the levee, they would have been able to widen it to at least the project levy standard, and maybe even cheaper. So that's just, I think that's also it.
So you're saying that then you'd have to have a gate that closes off this water, right?
Yeah, a lock or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like a lock.
If you would
Yeah.
build
That
that,
could be, yeah.
it would make the inside of the island also more attractive to live.
Okay, so you're saying that if they would have, they could have done exactly this geometry. They dug out where you now see water. They dig it out, so you have the water and people can put their boats. In Discovery Bay, actually, it's quite interesting. You have two kinds of water. You have open water, where the houses nearby are high, and you have enclosed water, where the houses are lower. So that would save costs on elevating that land. So your feeling is that if they would have been smarter to put those costs on the whole perimeter.
Yeah, but
This is fascinating because that's not the American style. Like in America, like everybody takes care of their own business, and in Holland, we put the money in one pile. We make a couple of huge dike rings, and we end up paying $30 each for our flood protection each year. Isn't that?
Well, you've already got the levees built.
Oh, you have the bills
Okay,
as well.
the investments have already been made. Yeah.
But the consequence of not developing this area in an elevated way is that people don't have an open connection to the water.
Yeah.
So the houses are not worth that much. But
If you
still.
develop this area, you will have about 50 to 60% more people living in the area, and it will also generate a lot more tax income for Bethel.
So the first thing to do would be
Finish this.
finish this. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun having these guys running around trying to figure all this out. So, how much longer are you here for?
1 week.
1 week. So if you see them around, ask them questions because at the end of the week they'll be gone back to the rain and cold. But they're going to come back, I'm sure.
We hope so.
No, she has these around.
Thank you for your attention.
Excellent.
Great, thanks.
There we go.